Hi guys. This is the story of my entitled mother-in-law, Susan, 59F. I, 29F, am now married to my husband, Andrew, 30M. Rewind to a few years back when Andrew and I first crossed paths. It was actually at the hospital where we both work. Yep, we're both in the healthcare biz. I'm a nurse, and he's a pediatrician. Now, let me tell you, it wasn't all smooth sailing from the get-go. Andrew and I had to navigate through some choppy waters to make our relationship work. You see, dating a colleague isn't always a walk in the park. There were those moments of sneaky glances across the hospital corridors, stolen conversations during lunch breaks, and trying not to get caught by our superiors. Let's just say, we weren't exactly supposed to be fraternizing on the job. But hey, love finds a way, right? After 2 years of secretly dating, well, not so secret to our close friends, Andrew popped the question, and boy, was I over the moon. Picture this, a romantic dinner at our favorite restaurant, candlelight flickering, soft music in the background, the whole shebang. And then, out of the blue, he gets down on one knee, producing the most beautiful ring I've ever laid eyes on. Of course, I said yes. Cue the happy tears and the flurry of phone calls to friends and family. Now, fast forward to the moving in phase. Let's just say it was a logistical puzzle trying to merge two separate lives into one cozy abode. There were boxes upon boxes of stuff to sort through, debates over whose IKEA furniture was superior, and the inevitable discovery of each other's quirky habits, like Andrew's insistence on organizing his socks by color. Yes, really. But despite the occasional bump in the road, we managed to create a home that was uniquely ours, a space filled with love, laughter, and the occasional friendly argument over whose turn it was to do the dishes. Now, let's talk about Susan. Where do I even begin? Susan is what you might call a classic helicopter parent. She's got a knack for hovering over every aspect of Andrew's life, making sure everything's just so. And let me tell you, her grip on him is tighter than a vice. From the moment Andrew was born, Susan's been there, guiding his every move like a puppeteer pulling the strings. And Andrew? Well, he's the epitome of the dutiful son, always eager to please his mama bear. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for close-knit family relationships, but sometimes, Susan's brand of love can feel a tad suffocating, especially when you're on the receiving end of her overbearing tendencies. First off, she's got this uncanny knack for inserting herself into every decision Andrew makes, big or small. Whether it's what he wears, where he works, or even who he hangs out with, Susan's opinion is like gospel to him. And woe betide anyone who dares to challenge her authority. She's not one to back down without a fight. Then there's her habit of constantly second-guessing everything I do. It's like she's got this radar for detecting any deviation from her idea of perfection. Take, for example, our wedding planning escapades. You'd think it'd be a joyous occasion, right? Wrong. Susan was like a bulldozer, and God forbid we didn't drop everything to cater to her every whim. Cue the guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments about how we never have time for family anymore. But perhaps the most frustrating thing about Susan's overbearing nature is the way it undermines Andrew's independence. It's like she can't fathom the idea of her baby boy growing up and making his own decisions. And while I get that she's coming from a place of love, it's hard not to feel like I'm constantly competing for Andrew's attention and approval. Susan has a knack for being, well, less than charming. She's got this thing about me not being up to snuff for her precious son, Andrew. And boy, does she make it known. Take this one time when we had her over for dinner. I busted my butt in the kitchen, cooking up a storm, only for Susan to take one bite and declare the chicken dry as a desert. Talk about a punch to the gut. Then there's her not so subtle digs about my career. Apparently, being a nurse just doesn't cut it in Susan's book. She's made more than a few snide remarks about how Andrew's job as a pediatrician somehow trumps mine. Real classy, right? And don't even get me started on her gift-giving skills, or lack thereof. Instead of, asking me what I might like for my birthday, she decides to gift me a self-help book on how to impress your mother-in-law. Yeah, thanks but no thanks, Susan. Susan's meddling ways extend far beyond just my relationship with Andrew. According to the grapevine, aka Andrew's relatives, Susan's been pulling this act with every girl he's ever brought home. And get this, apparently, one of his exes even called it quits because of Susan's overbearing presence. But you know what? None of that really fazed me all that much. Sure, it's not exactly comforting to hear that your potential future mother-in-law has a track record of driving away significant others like it's her day job. But between our crazy schedules we hardly had time to even think about Susan, let alone let her antics get to us. But this all changed when I got engaged. Suddenly, I found myself dealing with her more than I ever anticipated, and let me tell you, it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. From the get-go, Susan made it abundantly clear that she wanted a front row seat to all things wedding related. And I mean all things. We're talking dress fittings, venue scouting, menu tastings, you name it, she wanted in. At first, I tried to be diplomatic, politely including her in the decision-making process and nodding along as she offered up her unsolicited opinions. But as the weeks went by, it became increasingly evident that Susan had no intention of taking a back seat. Take, for example, the dress dilemma. I had this vision of finding the perfect gown, one that made me feel like $1,000,000 and screamed Emily. But Susan had other ideas. From insisting on accompanying me to every bridal boutique in town to vetoing dress after dress because they didn't meet her lofty standards, she made it clear that my dream dress was secondary to her own vision of bridal perfection. And then there was the venue saga. Andrew and I had our hearts set on this quaint little barn nestled in the countryside, a place that felt like us. But Susan had her sights set on something a bit more upscale. Cue the endless debates, the passive-aggressive remarks about how rustic wasn't exactly her idea of a dream wedding, and the inevitable compromise that left me feeling like I'd settled for second best. But perhaps the pièce de resistance of Susan's wedding planning takeover was her insistence on micromanaging every last detail. I'm talking flower arrangements, seating charts, and even the color scheme. Nothing was off limits. It got to the point where I found myself questioning whether this was even my wedding anymore or just a production starring Susan, directed by Susan, and produced by Susan. And let's not even get started on the dreaded honeymoon discussion. I kid you not, I wouldn't put it past Susan to try and tag along on our romantic getaway. After all, she'd already made herself a permanent fixture in every other aspect of our wedding planning. Why stop now? The big day had finally arrived, the day I'd been dreaming of since Andrew popped the question. Despite all the chaos leading up to it, I was buzzing with excitement to finally tie the knot with the love of my life. Nothing could dampen my spirits, not even Susan and her meddling ways, or so I thought. But just when I thought we were in the clear, Susan swooped in with a bombshell that had me reeling. Picture this, I'm all dolled up in my bridal attire, nerves and anticipation running high when Susan bursts into my room in a frenzy. And what does she have to say, you ask? Oh, just that her diamond necklace, yes, you heard that right, a diamond necklace had mysteriously gone missing. Now, you can imagine the collective gasp that echoed through the room as we tried to wrap our heads around this sudden turn of events. Susan, her eyes wide with panic, insisted that someone had stolen it from her room. Cue the frantic search party, with Susan leading the charge like a woman possessed. But amidst the chaos, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't adding up. So, in a moment of pure desperation, I tentatively suggested to Susan that maybe, just maybe, she'd misplaced the necklace. I mean, it happens to the best of us, right? Well, let's just say Susan wasn't exactly thrilled with my hypothesis. She shot me this dagger-like glare and practically spat out the words, "I'm not a forgetful person, Emily." And just like that, any hope of diffusing the situation with a bit of rational thinking went straight out the window. So there we were, me trying to reassure Susan that everything would be fine while simultaneously battling the sinking feeling in my gut that this was only the beginning of a wedding day disaster. As my bridesmaids rallied around Susan, determined to track down the elusive necklace, I couldn't help but wonder if this was Susan's way of stealing the spotlight one last time before I walked down the aisle. Just minutes before I was set to walk down the aisle, a few policemen strolled into the venue, looking all serious, and dropped the bombshell that they'd received a call about a stolen diamond necklace. And guess who the culprit was? None other than my dear mother-in-law, Susan. I was floored, to say the least. I mean, who in their right mind calls the cops on their own son's wedding day? Talk about a major buzzkill. But there we were, thrust into the midst of a full-blown police investigation, all because Susan couldn't find her precious necklace. So, I did what any bride-to-be in my shoes would do. Tried to defuse the situation as best as I could. I calmly explained to the officers that we were in the midst of searching for the necklace and that we couldn't confirm whether it was actually stolen or just misplaced. But of course, Susan wasn't about to let a little thing like reason get in the way of her melodrama. Meanwhile, my family, bless their hearts, swooped in to save the day. They chimed in, echoing my sentiments and reassuring the officers that it was all just a big misunderstanding. After all, what's a wedding without a little bit of chaos, am I right? But despite their best efforts to smooth things over, the tension in the air was palpable. Guests were whispering and shooting suspicious glances in Susan's direction, and I couldn't help but feel like the weight of the world was bearing down on my shoulders. I mean, who needs pre-wedding jitters when you've got a full-blown police interrogation to contend with? As the minutes ticked by and the search for the missing diamond necklace continued, the tension in the air became almost palpable. Family members scoured every nook and cranny of the venue, their frantic whispers and hurried footsteps echoing off the walls. Meanwhile, my wedding ceremony, which was supposed to start on time, was now delayed by a whole hour. I couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration welling up inside me. Here we were, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead of walking down the aisle to marry the love of my life, I was stuck playing detective in a real-life whodunit. I mean, who steals a necklace on someone's wedding day, for crying out loud? Just as I was on the verge of throwing in the towel and conceding defeat, a ray of hope appeared in the form of my 8-year-old nephew. With a triumphant grin plastered on his face, he bounded over to me and announced that he'd found the missing necklace. My heart skipped a beat as I eagerly asked him where he'd found it. And then he dropped the bombshell. He'd seen my mother-in-law, Susan, slip the necklace into her purse. My mind reeled with disbelief. Could it be true? Had Susan really stooped so low as to steal her own necklace on my wedding day? Before I could wrap my head around the gravity of the situation, my brother and mother entered the room, followed closely by Susan herself. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I mustered up the courage to confront her. "Did you find the necklace?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. To my shock, Susan shook her head, her expression a mask of innocence. "No," she replied, her tone betraying none of the guilt I expected to hear. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the conflicting accounts. Was my nephew mistaken? Had he perhaps seen someone else slip the necklace into their purse? But as I cast a wary glance at Susan, my suspicions only grew stronger. After all, she was the one who'd been making a fuss about the missing necklace from the very beginning. And now, with her denial ringing in my ears, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The tension in the room was so thick you could practically cut it with a knife. All eyes were on Andrew as he strode purposefully over to his mom, determination etched into every line of his face. And then, in a move that shocked us all, he reached out and snatched the purse from her grasp. With a swift motion, Andrew extracted the missing diamond necklace and held it up for all to see. "Don't worry, folks," he announced, his voice ringing out clear and firm. "We found the necklace." But Andrew wasn't done yet. Oh no, far from it. With the necklace dangling from his fingers like a damning piece of evidence, he turned his gaze squarely on his mom and let her have it with both barrels. He accused her of trying to steal the spotlight and ruin the wedding, his words cutting through the air like a knife. Susan, for her part, looked like a deer caught in the headlights. She stammered and protested, insisting that she had no idea how the necklace had ended up in her purse and pleading her innocence. But Andrew wasn't buying it, and neither were the rest of us. In a bold move that left us all speechless, Andrew declared that he was done with her shenanigans for the day. And just like that, he called in the cavalry aka security and asked them to escort Susan out of the venue. I'll never forget the look on Susan's face as the security guards led her away. It was a mix of shock, disbelief, and maybe even a hint of shame. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed small and vulnerable, stripped of the bravado that had always been her trademark. As Andrew and I exchanged vows and finally became husband and wife, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet relief wash over me. The weight of Susan's presence had lifted, replaced by the overwhelming joy of starting our new life together. Sure, the ceremony was over an hour later than planned, and we were all exhausted from the drama that had unfolded. But as we exchanged rings and sealed our love with a kiss, none of that seemed to matter anymore. Because at that moment, all that mattered was us, Andrew and me, together at last, ready to face whatever life threw our way. As if the wedding day drama wasn't enough, things took an unexpected turn during the reception. Just when we thought the chaos had finally subsided, my mother-in-law, Susan, decided to up the ante in the most bizarre way possible. The reception was in full swing, guests were laughing and dancing, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. That is until we heard a commotion coming from outside the venue. The staff informed us what happened and we went to check my mill-in out. As it turns out, my 59-year-old mother-in-law was attempting to scale the wall of the venue in a desperate bid to crash the party. And as if that weren't enough, she ended up injuring her leg in the process. Needless to say, Andrew and I were both stunned and horrified by the sight before us. But being the caring son that he is, Andrew rushed to Susan's side to check on her. She was screaming in pain, clutching her injured leg as tears streamed down her face. Before we knew it, the staff were informing us about what had happened and calling an ambulance. Now, here's where things got tricky. When the paramedics arrived, they assessed Susan's injury and determined that it was just a minor sprain, nothing that warranted a trip to the hospital. But Susan, ever the drama queen, insisted that it was more serious than that. She was adamant that she was in excruciating pain and needed immediate medical attention. And while Andrew and I were torn between wanting to help and feeling like we'd already dealt with enough drama for one day, we ultimately decided to err on the side of caution. So, Andrew asked his friend to step in and take Susan to the hospital, much to her dismay. She protested and yelled, demanding to know why Andrew himself wasn't coming with her. But Andrew stood firm, explaining that we needed to get back to the reception and that she'd be in good hands with his friend. And so, Andrew and I returned to the festivities. But as the night wore on and the music filled the air, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe we had been too harsh in our handling of the situation. I mean, sure, Susan's behavior had been completely out of line, but was kicking her out of the wedding and sending her off to the hospital really the right move? Shouldn't we have shown her more compassion, even in the face of her outrageous antics? So, Ida for kicking my mill out of the wedding and letting the best man take her to the hospital? Update 1. Hello everyone. Thank you for your support. I have an update for you guys. After the whole wedding fiasco, Andrew and Susan ended up having a major showdown. Once Susan got dropped off at her house instead of coming back to the reception, Let's just say she wasn't exactly thrilled about it. But hey, at least it put an end to her wedding crashing shenanigans, right? So, fast forward to the next day, and Andrew and I rolled back to our apartment, thinking the drama was finally behind us. But guess who was waiting for us outside? You got it, Susan. And let me tell you, she didn't look too pleased to see us. Before we could even open our mouths to say hello, Andrew cut right to the chase. Not now, Mom, he said, his voice tired and worn out. I'm really tired. But instead of backing off like any normal person would, Susan decided to push back. Oh, so now he didn't have time for his mother, she retorted, her tone dripping with passive aggressiveness. And just like that, we were thrust into yet another round of Susan's never-ending drama. We finally managed to wrangle ourselves inside the apartment, hoping for a moment's peace. But of course, Susan had other plans. She started yammering on and on, not even bothering to take a breath. I tried to give her the hint that now was not the time for a heart-to-heart, but she was having none of it. And just when I thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, Andrew reached his breaking point. He exploded, letting loose all the pent-up frustration and anger that had been simmering beneath the surface. If you loved me so much, Mom, then why did you try to ruin my wedding? He shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of our tiny apartment. And then he hit her with a real gut punch. You knew damn well that Emily bent over backward to make you happy, but it was never enough for you, he said, his words cutting like a knife. And just like that, the truth came spilling out, raw and unfiltered. Susan's refusal to own up to her actions only added fuel to the fire. She kept spouting excuses, claiming she had no idea how the necklace ended up in her purse or that maybe she simply forgot. And to top it all off, she started shedding tears, as if that would somehow erase everything that had happened. But Andrew wasn't buying any of it. He looked her straight in the eye and told her he was beyond disappointed in her behavior. He made it clear that it was going to take some serious time and effort for him to move past this betrayal. Finally, Andrew reached his breaking point. With a heavy heart, he asked Susan to leave. At first, she dug in her heels, refusing to budge. But when she realized that neither Andrew nor I were about to back down, she reluctantly left, shooting us one last glare before storming off and saying that we were going to regret this later. Update 2. So, it's been a hot minute since my last update, and let me tell you, things have been eerily quiet on the Susan front. After Andrew and I gave her the boot, I was fully expecting her to blow up our phones or show up unannounced at our doorstep. But to my surprise, there wasn't a peep from her. Talk about a plot twist, am I right? We were starting to get a little worried, to be honest. I mean, love her or hate her, Susan was never one to shy away from drama. So when she suddenly went radio silent, it definitely raised a few eyebrows. But just when we thought the storm had finally blown over, guess who decided to make a grand entrance? Yup, you guessed it, Susan. And let me tell you, she had news. Big news. Apparently, after everything that went down, she'd had an epiphany or something. She strolls into our house like she owns the place and drops the bombshell that she's moving to a living assisted facility. Now, I don't know about you, but I was completely floored by this revelation. I mean, here's the same woman who tried to scale a wall to crash our wedding, and now she's talking about moving to an assisted living facility? Talk about a 180-degree turn. Andrew, bless his heart, tries to talk some sense into her. He's all like, what are you doing, Mom? You don't have to do this. We'll figure something out. But Susan, being Susan, insists that this is what's best for her. She goes on about how she'll have company and won't be all alone, yada yada yada. And just like that, she drops the bombshell that she's already leased out her house and she'll be moving out this weekend. I don't know about you, but I was reeling from the news. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under us. Andrew, being the stand-up guy that he is, offers to drive her himself. But of course, Susan's got to go and play the guilt card, saying she doesn't want to be a burden or whatever. Classic Susan move, am I right? After she left, Andrew and I sat down and had a heart-to-heart. He admitted that he didn't quite buy Susan's whole story. So, being the detective that I am, I reached out to a friend of Susan's who happens to be a realtor. And wouldn't you know it, she confirmed that Susan was indeed serious about this whole move. We were both feeling a mix of emotions: sadness, confusion, maybe even a hint of relief. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like we wanted Susan out of our lives completely. But after everything that had happened, maybe a little distance wouldn't be such a bad thing. But still, it's hard not to feel a pang of guilt knowing that things had come to this. After all, she's family, and seeing her go through something like this was tough to swallow. But at the end of the day, we knew we had to respect her decision, no matter how hard it was to accept. Update 3. Andrew and I had psyched ourselves up for what we thought was going to be a smooth transition to the assisted living facility for Susan. I mean, we were ready to make the best of a less than ideal situation and maybe even squeeze in a little quality family time along the way. But let me tell you, things did not go according to plan. Not even close. As we piled into the car, Andrew and I were trying to keep the mood light and breezy. We cracked jokes, sang along to the radio, anything to distract ourselves from the awkwardness of the situation. But Susan, bless her heart, was as quiet as a mouse. When we finally pulled up to the facility, I could feel the tension in the air thickening by the second. We exchanged nervous glances as we stepped through the doors, bracing ourselves for whatever lay ahead. But nothing, not even our wildest imaginations, could have prepared us for what happened next. You see, when we approached the reception desk to check Susan in, we were met with blank stares and confused expressions. It turns out there was no booking in Susan's name. Zip. Zilch. Nada. Susan, of course, was adamant that she'd made the booking herself and that the guy on the phone had confirmed everything. But as it turned out, there had been a major miscommunication. The guy had only confirmed a visit, not a booking. Andrew, bless his soul, tried to keep his cool as he grilled Susan about how she could possibly have made such a colossal blunder. But Susan, being Susan, started to unravel right before our eyes. Tears welled up in her eyes as she admitted that she didn't know what to do next. She'd already gone and rented out her apartment, thinking everything was all set. And now, here she was, faced with the harsh reality that things weren't going according to plan. I glanced at Andrew, and I could see the gears turning in his head. Without a word, I knew exactly what he was thinking. And when he turned to me and gave me that look, I nodded in silent agreement. And then, in a move that caught us all off guard, Andrew extended an olive branch to Susan. He told her that she could stay with us until we figured out a solution. So yes, we brought her back home, and I don't know how long she is going to stay with us. I just hope that there is less drama than what I'm expecting at the moment. Update 4. Hi guys. This is my last update, so buckle down. Living with Susan was, well, let's just say it was everything you'd expect and then some. Andrew and I were just starting out as newlyweds, and the last thing we needed was Susan cramping our style. I mean, we had a honeymoon to look forward to in just 2 short weeks, and the last thing I wanted was to come back to find her still camped out in our living room. So, I hatched a plan. I have this friend who's always traveling for work, and wouldn't you know it, her company was sending her off to another state for a couple of months. And get this, her apartment was going to be sitting empty the whole time. Talk about perfect timing, am I right? So, I reached out to her and laid out the situation. And you know what? She was totally on board with helping out. I mean, who wouldn't want to lend a hand to a friend in need, right? I pitched the idea to Andrew, and he was all for it. I mean, it made perfect sense. By the time my friend would be back from her trip, Susan's lease would be up, and we'd be free from her clutches once and for all. Now, getting Susan to agree to the plan was a whole other ballgame. At first, she was hesitant, saying she didn't want to impose or intrude on a stranger's space. But I reassured her that the apartment was nearby and that she could come and visit us whenever she wanted. After a bit of back and forth, she finally caved and agreed to give it a shot. And just like that, we packed up all of Susan's stuff and moved her into my friend's place. It was a bit of a hassle, sure, but it was nothing compared to the relief we felt knowing that the end was finally in sight. So, for now, at least, the Susan saga has come to a close. And let me tell you, it feels like a weight has been lifted off our shoulders. Sure, there's still plenty of uncertainty lurking on the horizon, but for now, we're content to bask in the peace and quiet of our Susan-free existence.